Good evening and welcome to a very special episode of Between the Lanes. I'm Ron Hirschman and back on the show. He was on about a year ago or so is George Kimber from the UK. Hi, George.
Hello. How are you, Ron?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, it's a bit later in the day for me. You just got out of bed.
Well, yeah, it's early. No, I've been up for a little bit, but yeah, we're taping this show in the morning and for the time difference between the US and the UK. So
yeah. 5 hours is a long time. I've been up too long already.
You're ready for your nap.
I sort of hibernate in the winter. I get up, my wife kills me for not getting up early, but I go to bed midnight, wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning, have an hour on the internet, then go back to bed after a cup of tea and a bit of ginger cake or something. And then I sleep till about 10 or 11, and she says I'm wasting the day. But of course, because I'm not going till midnight, she goes at 10.
Right.
There's 2 hours difference, so I don't waste any time. In fact,
oh, I lost you. Oh, there you go. Okay, so we may have some technical difficulties here. So yeah, are you back? You're back.
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. So anyway, I was just explaining we may have some technical difficulties from time to time because the program is not cooperating today, and we did a little pre-show yesterday just to test, and there's a problem somewhere, and we haven't figured it out, so we're doing this a different way than normal. So we'll manage through.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. Always fascinating insight into the old days of slot racing.
The old days of slot racing. So this episode is about a little bit about JP van Rossum, who recently passed away and was one of the key players, key parts. I feel that probably led to the slot racing boom of the early '90s, and as well as he was the catalyst for organizing international scale racing. And
yeah, for sure. The guy was amazing, really. I mean, looking back on it now, I'm just reading up from our magazine, which was printed in the UK, Slot Car Racing, and a guy called Nick Evans was the editor then, and he gave quite a lot of detail. And so for anyone who's never attended one of these JP van Rossum races, I'll just give you a flavour of what was what. Because bearing in mind, really, for me personally, it was a great time because I was in the 80s. I was at my zenith in terms of my national championship winning performances.
Right.
And so that got me on the boat, if you like, the Van Rossum races. 7 British drivers were generally invited to certainly the 88 race and the 89 race.
Right.
The preceding that was the 87 race, which probably was as good a race as any. But that was the first time, I suppose, we had the 24th races mixing with 1/32 scale. And so, really, this was before the days of Eurosport 24. I mean, Eurosport 24 started around about 91, where there was a trial race in the Czech Republic. And that has emerged really as a substitute in many ways for wing racing. But we have to credit Van Rossum with getting us to that point where we all knew each other, Brazilians, New Zealanders, Americans, Canadians.
Right.
And it was looking at the entry list for the first championship, there was several Czech drivers. So that was the really start of getting the Eastern Bloc, which had, I suppose in '89 was when the Berlin Wall came down. So
right.
we were going from there. And Josef Miskolski, he was probably the leading activist in that area of Eastern Germany. And so if you bring it forward to the day where we see Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians,
Right.
The full mix of Eastern Europeans, Ukrainians. For me, looking back at it all, certainly the Van Rossum era was the catalyst for all of that to happen. What we did know about, of course, was the background to JP, his lifestyle. And, I only had a few personal experiences. The guy was very difficult to talk to. I suppose when you got 100 people invited,
Right.
who do you talk to? But over the time, I got to know reasonably well, and a few of the little incidents that came about were, I said to him one day, being a barber, I said, JP, why don't you get your hair cut? It looks awful. It looks terrible.
He's like Walker.
And he said, George, I have to say, I will not cut my hair. So because I was a heroin addict. And he says, this is to remind me how I beat heroin.
Yep.
That was his very first sort of play with me on things. But to get back to certainly the first trip to America with JP, he invited me and 5 other Brits, and we flew by jumbo, and all our expenses were paid, the hotel, the food, the racing. All we had to fork out for was the entry fees, which were reasonably high, but there again,
Right.
considering we were getting a handout car and handout motor, they weren't too bad. But when we got off the airplane in Chicago in O'Hare, there was these chauffeurs with big signs for the racing drivers,
Right.
and we were escorted to some Lincoln Continental 8-seater limousines, and he said, if you want a beer, just get out the back and get a beer, and we got in there, all had a beer, and we were all escorted to the raceway.
Yep.
Absolutely, first class treatment.
Right.
Couldn't say anything. So that was an incredible thing at that time. I mean, now international travel's changed, and we have, I've been around the world. I haven't been a rich man, but I haven't been a drinker or a smoker, so I can afford those things.
Right.
But looking back on it, at that time, it was a pretty dramatic game changer, really, for slot racing.
Right.
And so, I think I was looking at one of the budgets there, $51,000 for the 1989 race, $51,000.
Yeah, I think that both races were $50,000 or 50. It was 88 was like 50 was advertised as $50,000 budget, and then I think it was like $1,000 more for the following year for 89.
So, that was I suppose it was beer money.
Yeah. Beer
Bearing
money.
in mind what we found on Wikipedia and other forums to find out the full extent of GP's wizardry.
Shenanigans.
But my first meeting with Jim was at the race in Toulouse, and I got off the plane and got picked up, and I walked towards the area where there was a raceway in Toulouse, and
Right.
there was JP outside, sitting outside on little deck chairs, and there was 2 beauties on either side of it, absolutely stunning ladies, and behind them were the Ferraris. So it was a pretty good play by JP. He looked really cool.
Right.
There's only one snag. He had a meal somewhere along the line, and there was an amount of crumbs and debris from his food all over his beard and hanging down, but didn't make a joke to him, I suppose. But
No.
just so very, very strange
Right.
guy,
Yeah, he was he was what we would call kind of unkempt and untidy at times. I mean, if you was to see JP, a lot of people would think he's probably homeless. He just had that rough-looking exterior with the hair and the beard, but
he wasn't a pretty guy either.
no.
What was that guy called? Klaus Kinski.
Yeah.
He was an actor, wasn't he? He was a pretty awful-looking guy, but JP always reminded me of him.
Right.
But funny enough, another story's just come to mind that I think it was much later in the 90s when I went to one of his meetings, and I was downstairs, and his girlfriend just happened to start talking to me. And she says, "Oh, you English still like your fish and chips and your cups of tea?" So which I said, "Well, you Belgians still like your lager and your coffee." You know?
Yeah.
And then we started a conversation, and she said, "Well, what job do you do?" I said, "Well, actually, I'm a hairdresser." She said, "Oh, you're a hairdresser?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, what do you think about my hair?" I said, "Well, it looks great, apart from one thing." She said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, it's too dark. So, you know, it's not becoming of you. You know, you girls all make the mistake of wanting to put very dark color on your hair and your skin. It doesn't complement your skin."
Right.
So she said, "Well," so we got into this deep conversation. And then all of a sudden, Van Rossum comes through the door, looks at me, and goes over to this lady who, she was a mature beauty. I mean, she was in her 40s, I would say. And he put her arms around her, around the back of her, and around the front of her neck, and he was behind. And he said, "George, she is mine." So I guess with his background,
Right.
that he was a man who owned women.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because there's
But I
something.
can't imagine what his wife went through. You know, I mean,
Right.
his first, you know, sad really in the sense, you know, that his predilection for all things women,
Right. And
gave to the best brothels in Europe.
right. And when we had the '88 Worlds, he had Rashida with him, which was the young blonde, and the story was that in Belgium, it's a custom, I guess, that you can be married yet have a girlfriend, younger girlfriend or whatever.
I like that.
Okay.
We're up into that one.
Now I've tried to find out how that custom works online with Google, but I couldn't. I just never really.
You have to go to Google for that one.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, I mean, you know, that was the story, because you know, here's this guy in his mid to late 40s with the 22-year-old, you know, attractive young blonde, and we know it's about money, but yet JP's
It
married.
always is.
Yeah,
It
well,
always,
yeah,
everything.
but we know JP's married, but in Belgium, that's a custom that's allowed. So I don't, you know, but I think JP had 3 different wives.
Yeah, but he had a sense of being. Well, you guys have a cult group.
Well, hold on. So here we go again, but George will be right back. All right, you're back.
Yeah, I've got to keep on pressing a button requesting video.
Oh, okay. Well, we were not worried about that. We have the video here, but
we missed that last piece. We missed that last piece, did we?
well, yeah, we were talking about the 3 wives, and
Yeah, that's right.
so.
Well, I think he, but as well as that, he was also, you know, maybe that is all the negative side of the guy.
Right.
If we look at what he did to racing, I mean, he switched on pretty quickly. From the '88 race, he realized we were all racing different chassis. Some were better than others.
Right.
So he started obviously in Toulouse in '87 by creating the Eurotoy, the first Eurotoy, which was pretty awful, really.
Right.
I don't know where he had those manufactured. Do you know the first Eurotoys?
No, I heard that the stamp. Okay, when you're talking like the Big Brother car.
Well, I think that was Limpac, wasn't it? That was the year Limpac and Dan DeBella and quite a few were involved in.
Well, there was right. Yeah, there was Little Brother, and then there was Big Brother. So, I think okay the Eurotoy chassis I talk about is the one with the front bumper in front of the
Yeah.
guide flag, and I believe those were stamped in Brazil, or that was a rumor that I never followed up on because I mean that chassis never became popular. Um,
Well, it wouldn't, but I guess it would be about for Van Rossum
yeah,
equalizing racing. That's
right,
what he was essentially about. I mean, he wanted all the big names together, but then he wanted to create a circus, if you like.
right,
But he wanted everyone starting on the same footing.
right, and it was part of the
And
Eurotoy package. You know what I mean? The company
so it
Eurotoy.
wouldn't have mattered how good or bad it was. It was
Right,
down. He wanted to see drivers. He wanted to see how good Americans were in scale racing and how good Brits were in wing racing and then all the other categories as well, the model racing, I suppose.
right,
So in that sense, I think he was the forerunner of realizing that if you're going to have international slot racing, you have to have a certain amount of equality in the racing. And so his endurance races were nearly always about that.
right.
And by God, were there some endurance races.
Yes.
I'm looking at the schedule here for these two races. And, we were flaked out, I think, by the end. I mean, it was 8 or 9 days solid of racing.
Oh yeah.
I think then he followed it with a 24-hour race.
Right.
So,
Well, it got cut to 16 hours the second year, but because the first year there was a 12-hour race, and then the next year it was going to be 24, but then they cut it to 16. But
and that was the one where they all raced out of they came out in the street and they all had to run to get to that controller first. And the first guy to get to his controller had £200 $200
right.
bonus.
Yeah, it was a Le Mans start, a true Le Mans start. You had to run and do everything but jump in your car.
And the thing about Van Rossum for me was he had like a pot and he stirred everything all the time.
Oh, wow.
And he loved to have a go at the Brits about glue racing.
Right.
Which was strange because in America they were racing with even more glue than we were. And yet for some reason he focused on the UK. And of course this is where I had I decided to create an alter image called George's Van Rossum.
Right.
And George's Van Rossum, counter-punched what he said. So he came up with something like the little misty island of Britain where they race in, layers of goop and with lonely saloons and no lane changes, which basically summed up our racing in many ways.
Right.
In which why I was an advocate of making the change.
Right.
And I recently talked to several people, mostly on my Facebook page, and they've all had to admit it was the right thing to do.
Right.
But at the time, it was dramatic because we had Tim Ryan, who just covered the track in glue. You had Dave Harvey, who was another advocate of it, and several others. And it wasn't last year, actually, I was at a meeting up in the northeast here, and the guy came up to me and said, "You made me stop slot racing for 9 years." And he personally blamed me
Right.
for him giving up racing. We changed the whole landscape of the UK. And now looking back on it, of course, people say, well, that's naturally the only way to race.
Right.
But Europe definitely led the way, and we eventually had to follow. And of course, I suppose America has as well, in so many ways.
Yeah, to a certain degree, yes.
Well, I mean, where's wing racing now in America? Is it?
Well, it's. If you go
real terms.
If you go to a Nats here and there, well, okay, if you're talking glue, if you go to the Nats now, if there's 6 classes, 4 or 5 of them are running spray glue, and only one of them is running full goop, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, but then wing car racing isn't as big now as it was then either. So,
but is Eurosport or scale racing bigger now?
It's smaller now than what it once was here. Okay, and my opinion is it's cost more than anything, and we have so many alternatives here, like in
flexi racing, womp racing.
Yeah. So you
drag, well, obviously drag is pretty big.
Right. You can find something to fit your budget, and it's out there. Where in some of the European countries, we only race this, or that's all they race. You know, they race Eurosports and that's it. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, I'm in the process of getting up to speed to race in this year's World Championship in the team race only. I can't get into the other races.
Right.
I suspect I won't get in. But there's several warm-ups in the UK this year. But I mean, I spent a lot of money, more than I wanted to spend, just getting ready for production.
Right.
Because I'm brought to the productions motor, you know, buy the bits, do them yourself, still over £100, so $120, $130 a motor. You need 3 or 4 motors. Amazing where the money can go very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And then you need your alternatives, your rubber, obviously. I mean, exploring braids at the moment, trying to get braids which don't burn.
Right.
Because you know, and Dave Harvey there yesterday was announcing on his site he had the Cahosa strap motors, multi-mag, 24, 28 mag, for 325 English pounds. So that's $350 US.
Right.
So, but despite all of that, we seem as though we can't get into a meeting. We can't book it. We've got to pre-register, and then you've got to have ranking points, and you won't get in. So that's 130 drivers maximum per class. So that really is quite amazing for me personally, you know. But I guess if you get the whole world interested, which is what's happened,
right,
then the best guys are turning up. You know, but that's like Van Rossum races. The best guys turned up because he paid them. Right. So you know, we've come in the circle, and I suppose looking back on it all, we should be thankful in so many ways for JP. But he used to wind everybody up, and as I say, we came at loggerheads when I said there was just no good Belgian slot racer. Right. And he flipped, and you know the rest, which was that he announced on his, and actually something which we haven't talked about at all is his newspaper, online newspaper, which was ahead of it. I mean, there's no one else dedicated more time to the daily goings on in slot racing, and then creating these elaborate recreations of endurance races, and then fixing cars to different drivers. And it was a game he played constantly over the years. And not always did he come up trumps with the money, obviously, but he went through this process of trying to promote. And I think he realized eventually that he was more into toy or model racing. I think that's where his NASCAR series later in the 90s was to prove that, I think. And again, but it was equalization of sorts, of course. Well, of sorts. Because his son tended to have a lightweight car, these NASCAR bodies that just about took the whole of the plastic out of it and left a film, and then sort of put fiberglass seized them up or made them solid with fiberglass, but they were still 3 times lighter than everyone else's car. Right. Yeah. But Piggy made a few world championships.
Yeah, well, in 2000 he had the Millennium race, which was held at his house in the basement on a 6-lane Carrera track, and the Czechs were there. There was a team from Holland there. There were 6 teams because it was a 6-lane track. So the Belgium team. I'd have to go through my notes but anyway, you get the picture. So I think there was actually 2 Czech teams there, and Horky was there, and Frankie, and a few other Czechs. Yes, and so then the American team was myself, Gugu, and Felipe de L'Espinay. So that was a true American team right there, wasn't it? So
that's where Philip came in on the scene, was it? That was the only race he ever went to? Or?
That was the only race that he went to as far as JP goes.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so the Belgium team was Limpak and JP, and I can't remember the gentleman's name now, but he was like the Belgium model car champion at the time. He was pretty good. So we were told we had to run Porsche 911 bodies, hand out motors, hand out tires, play fit chassis. Everything's fine. So we get there, and everybody has that, except for the Belgium team, which has a Toyota GT1 prototype body on their car and an inline motor in their car. And we kind of thought, well, we got angle winders, we will beat the inline. But that body was so low and everything, and probably so much lighter. I mean, they just dominated the race. So,
well, I think nearly all of his latter races, certainly going into the Brussels in 2000s and 2003, 2004, were all set up for Piquet, really. You know, I mean, I don't have a grudge against the kid. I mean,
right.
You know, it was Van Rossum's party. He was paid.
Right.
So he would get, you know, they raced on a track, I think one of the tracks where it was their club track. So,
right.
And the car was set up by the best guys at doing it, the Dutch, I think. And so, you know, but it was a good event from the social side.
Right.
We could, you know, to go over there and get some money for it and to compete against guys, and you know, it was a fantastic era. I mean, you know, but of course the problem was you never really knew when the race was going to happen. Certainly the latter years.
Right.
You know, but maybe he'd run out of some of his money by then, or most of his money by then.
Right.
But I guess looking back on JP, he was a cute character because
he was a character.
My understanding was that he ended up being sent to jail.
Yes, he was sentenced. He was sentenced to prison. Yeah.
Tax evasion. He went to jail, but he must have had a lawyer or someone who knew there was a loophole.
Right.
He signed up to be an MP.
Yes.
He could get away with not going to jail.
Correct. Because in Belgium, they don't jail their politicians, supposedly. I mean, so he goes to court. He's found guilty. He goes to prison for a short time, discovers I can start a political party. If I get elected, I get out of jail. Because he was sentenced to 10 years. Okay. So,
10 years, was it? Right.
Yeah, so he starts the Rossem party, and they win, and he gets out of jail, and he's on Parliament. So I don't know how many years he was on Parliament, but another Belgium law is once you're out of politics, 10 years later, you'll go serve your sentence.
You go back and you do your sentence.
Right. So he got out of the political thing and was a free bird for a while, and then 2 or 3 years ago, he started Rossem 2, the new party, because he was scheduled to go back to prison. Okay. So
you got to admit one thing: this guy was ahead of the pack, wasn't he?
Well, you know, a lot of people talk bad about JP, I guess, or a few people talk bad about JP, but you know, he plays the system. Or in his own words in one of his books, he did it as a way to, you know, F the system. So
yeah.
I don't think in the case of what he did after he got caught, per se, but I don't think he was effing the system, but he was playing the system. And
yeah, but I think his personality was that he wanted to be a
right.
radical. He wanted to be
right.
An individual out of the establishment.
Yes.
You know, just like in American politics, you've got the same thing. Trump
right.
is popular with some people and very unpopular with the establishment.
Right.
And you know, you create a radical figure like that, you know, an extremist, a guy on the fringe of, you know, in so many ways.
Right.
It appeals to people.
Right.
And overall, if we look back at where we were talking, it actually appeals to us that the guy somehow found time to be the benefactor of slot racing. You know, that piece
right.
of put on Facebook about him being the Robin Hood of Belgium. You know, received a lot of people who went along that line. I think several
right.
Belgians and Dutch, you know, almost shared my page as
right.
if, you know, this was, I'd hit it on the head that he was to us a Robin Hood.
Right. But see, the thing is, at the time, not many of us, if anybody, knew what he was doing was illegal, because
Well,
nobody
I think
knew.
certainly, you know, if we look back, I had a slight, you know, thing with Charlie Gooding, who was in banking and finance. And
Right,
he gave me a couple of hints about the background, but I couldn't imagine it was on the scale it was.
right,
And as we were talking about a little bit yesterday, it was pension funds. But then again, the pension fund managers, where
Right.
were they in all this? You know,
Right.
why was it greed that motivated them to enlist and pay money into Van Rossum scam, if you like to call it that?
right,
Now they're not accountable for that, using poor people's money, as
right,
Gillespie said. You know, is it? You know, where do we go with all this? You
Right.
know, it seems it's a pretty awful world we live in.
sure.
In politics and money are intertwined, and everywhere we go and everything that happens is about really money.
Right,
And there's a system. He died, and we all look back and think, Jesus, how could anyone live a life like that? He lived the extreme life.
oh yeah, he had it all at one time. I mean,
He had it all,
or could have had it all. I mean,
and he lost it all.
yeah, he lost it all. That's right.
Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah,
But what you can't account for is the fact that the guy had an incredible life. You know, the experiences, the negative experiences, the positive experiences, and we all have those in our life, but not to the extreme level that he had. And you've
Right.
got to say, I mean, you know, incredible, really, fascinating creature.
right,
That's the word for me, creature.
right. All right. Well, let's go into some, I guess, a little review and history of the 88 and 89 worlds that JP promoted and put on here in the United States at Grand Raceway in Chicago, which, you know, he bought the raceway prior to the 88 worlds. And Eurotoy was a new and upcoming company, or they were trying to make it a feasible company. And Dan DeBella was involved with Eurotoy, and, you know, cars were going to be produced here. And I think they did produce cars. I don't know if they produced, how many they produced. I don't know if it was a couple hundred or a couple thousand, but they were available for some time. Beautiful, beautiful catalog. And then, you know, like I said, JP had the raceway in Chicago. He owned it. And prior to the Worlds, I think about 6 months prior, they had what they called a public promotion, where people could come in and buy the 32nd scale car, and you would qualify it. And then after 6 months, the top 8 qualifiers would make this public race and race for one of the 2 new Fieros that JP was giving away, one to the ranked drivers, one to non-ranked drivers. And we'll get more into that here in a second, but we're going to just go ahead and start. So who's that good-looking guy, George?
Well, that's George's Kimber.
That's
Not quite George, but hey, you know. Yeah, and I was only ranked 40th then. Terrible, isn't it? Yeah, I'll be what, about 43 years old, in the prime of my life in so many ways.
Right.
Still had hair.
Still.
Had the mustache then, of course.
I must ask you a question.
Tom Selleck look.
Tom Selleck, there you go. Okay, so this is a copy of the magazine after the 88 Worlds, and the 3 world champions were at that time Mike Swiss in Group 7 and Fuego Giannotti. He was the endurance world champion, and then Jan Limpak was the 32nd scale Eurosport world champion. So long and complicated week, but we'll make it through here. So this was a picture. This is a picture of the Blue King that was at Grand Raceway. Hasse Nilsson built this. This was the first King track, I believe, that Hasse built without a second bottom or a double deck. This was a one deck track. As you can see, it had the cross the cross legs underneath. This track was built January of '87. It hosted the '87 USRA Nats. It was a very fast track in its time. Had the Sweet Axie lap counter, which is what this little thing is here. It's a light bar for the lap counter. And during the week, the Sidaxi counter was only good for laps of 2 seconds or slower, and the cars were getting below that in practice, and then they had to put the JoyX computer over on the King track at some point so they could record the times. And
that was Mark JoyX.
Mark JoyX. There you go. So you're better with these.
He was a computer man.
Right. So we were talking about the Fieros, and this is Zendik Benz behind the wheel of his Pontiac Fiero. And there was two Fieros. There was a red one and a gold one. And if I remember right, they ran the ranked drivers race first, and he won. And then they ran the public race, which Steve Pepper won. And they gave Zendik the choice of which color do you want. And he took red because it was the home colors of the home country, Czechoslovakia. So he took the red one, and Steve got the gold one, which actually was good for Steve because the gold one was a GT where the red one wasn't. So the gold GT was actually worth a little bit more money than the red Fiero at the time. So,
but the red Fiero would look sexier, I would guess.
Yeah, you get more tickets in a red car than you will any other color car, they'll tell you. So there's Steve Pepler. He's getting the keys to his Fiero from John Ford. And this is a picture of one of George's friends, Gary Canals. Kennel.
The man who went away with $2,500.
Yes, $2,500 in Concours winnings. Was that at the 88 or 89? I guess it would have been the 88 Worlds, right?
I think he was involved in both, I think.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he walked away with lots of money in both of them. So.
Yeah. Well, I think he switched on the 89. He realized the potential for getting a lot of money by all the Brits running his bodies, and so the Italians ran as well.
Right.
So he was a smart cookie, but he was also obviously getting paid by Van Rossum to do the whole of the editorial side of the meeting as well.
Right. Right.
So but I don't know what was involved in that side of it, but I mean, I think certainly, obviously, all his expenses, his plane fare, his hotel, but I guess he would be paid a bit more as well, because he would have to be around to report on each race. He'd have to do a pretty comprehensive insight into each race. So, but he was a brilliant Concours. All of that wording and lettering and numbers are all hand painted.
Right.
That's not decal at all.
Yeah, the cars were beautiful. I mean, the pictures do them no justice. And I guess before we go further with this, we should probably the 88 Worlds was kind of half scale cars and half wing cars, because there was wing car races for box stock 12 and international 15 and group 27 and group 7, and then a couple warm-up races and qualifying races. And then on the scale side, it was all wire brass, what we would call box stock 15 chassis here in the States at the time.
Yeah.
You know, inexpensive $15 chassis, group 12 motors, and of course the beta bodies, which you had to run. And some drivers were assigned certain bodies, and they had to run certain paint schemes over other drivers. And then there was C1 and C2 classes, and C2 classes were for the stamped steel cars, and they all ran together in the endurance races, and then it went by overall laps for the overall finish.
Yeah.
So, in the endurance races, I think there was 5 or 6. They were all 3 hours duration. They were team
Well,
races.
in '89, I'm looking here, and I've made some notes. And we've got
Yeah, I'm talking 88.
8-hour races. In '89, we had 5 8-hour races and a 12-hour race.
Right. Well, in 88, which is where we're at right now,
Right.
they were 3 hours, and then they topped it off with a 5-hour enduro or 12-hour enduro race, excuse me, at the end. And then there was the Coops de Benelux race, and then there was the Old Timers race. And I know that the Old Timers race was for Eurotoy chassis, and I believe every entrant got a free Eurotoy chassis. And because I still have mine, it's sitting here, and I will show that a little bit. Well, I got the body from the Old Timers race. I got the chassis in the back, but so
yeah, we had Old Timers Cup de Benelux and a 124th International Group 12 race as well.
yes, and that was for wire chassis.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on.
But I think in '88, people were not racing the same chassis. There were several different chassis in the mix.
Right.
And I think from that, for '89, he realized he would have to create a chassis, which we'll no doubt talk about in the near future.
Right.
So this is Mr. Limpak's Retro-Rama.
Yes, this was his Concours. His Concours entry that was second place to the Silk Cut Jaguar we previously seen. And then this was Dave Muchow, who was a local Chicago racer. That was his Old Timers Concours car. And I believe in the Old Timers race, we all had to run the Porsche P4 body because I have the same body. Matter of fact, that was my...
Sorry, is that a Porsche or a Ferrari?
It's a Ferrari.
Oh, it's a Ferrari. I thought you said Porsche.
Oh, maybe I did. I meant Ferrari P4, but
right.
Yeah, there's my body from that race. Not too beat up, but I made that main, so we'll talk about more of that here. And then this was another one of Gary's bodies, 132nd, and then this was another one of Gary's entries. So, and then
very detailed.
Very detailed, and like you said, Gary made lots of money. And then, of course, there was the 132nd Eurosport race, which this is the bottom view of Jan Limpak's winning car, and we'll talk more about that as we get down the road. I kind of didn't get all this in order, but this was the first time I'd actually seen Eurosport cars. No, I take that back. Second time I'd seen them race because first time I ever seen them race was in '86 at the USRA Nats in Detroit. And, guys like Chubba and John Laster and Fred Hood and Rudy Garriga, they all had them because they had been over to at least one time to one of JP's races. And them guys had the cars, and they liked racing them, and that was, if it hadn't been for JP, I don't know if Eurosport racing would ever happen here in the United States, because no one in the United States would have ever got exposed to it.
So we are thankful for him for that, but also there must have been a movement towards, as you can see, the miniature strap motor. So
right.
So that would help 30-second racing in a sense, wouldn't it?
Well,
all of a sudden, a lighter, smaller motor.
Right. See, we knew, if there was a few in the U.S. that knew that you guys in the UK were racing 30-second. We didn't call them Euro cars, but you raced 30-second cars that were basically Eurosport cars. They were unlimited, open, 1/32 scale cars.
Yeah.
We knew that you guys raced them, but there was no interest here to race those.
No.
Until JP came along, invited Americans over, and made them race those cars, because that was part of your deal, that in order to get the money, you have to race these other classes while you're here.
I think that's the thing to make an observation on with Van Rossum was that he was, I say, very cute in so many ways, but that was one element he didn't want wing racers going over and paying their expenses, and
Right.
then all of a sudden say, hang on a minute, we've got a 30-second race. Oh, we're not interested in that.
Right.
We're going sightseeing. He
Right.
made it compulsory that you
Yes.
had to engage in other classes
Right.
and other races. And that's what he enjoyed. He wanted the whole circus to work, and he made sure that his money and his expenses were only paid out to guys who conformed with what he wanted.
Yep. So, if you race Euro Sports United States, you have to thank JP van Rossum, because if it wasn't for him, we probably would not be doing it.
Exactly.
So,
one little feature on that chassis, which is quite unusual, is the
we'll go back to that.
split pans.
Oh, I missed it. Yeah, the split outside pans. Yeah.
Yeah, which I've introduced back into UK racing and retro for the last few years, and worked very well. So even in those days, there was something in that configuration of pan
right.
which works. And of course, Mr. Limpak, well, I don't know what kind of money he won for that, winning the 132nd Eurosport. Have you got any idea what kind of?
I've been thinking that paid. I think that paid at least $1,000, maybe $2,000.
Yeah, John went home a happy man.
Sure. So then at the, of course, like we talked earlier, JP van Rossum, along with Dan DeBell, had started the company Eurotoy. And, of course, at the time, the big flexi car king of the market was Ken McDowell in Parma. And, of course, JP wanted a slice of that market. And they had a kind of quickly thrown together Parma versus Eurotoy race with Mr. McDowell versus JP van Rossum, the two owners of the companies, in a race. I don't remember. I think that JP actually won the race, but JP's car was totally dialed in. They just threw a car to Ken. Ken at one time, many, many years ago, was a pretty decent slot car racer, but at this point in his life, he probably hadn't raced a slot car in 10 to 15 years. So, it wasn't – I remember a bunch of people just, blew it off as, just another JP publicity stunt, and that's pretty much what it was. It really didn't, because the cars weren't even equal. I mean, I think the Flexi car had the 16D motor, and JP's had an X12 motor in it. So it wasn't a very fair –
wasn't even playing.
No. So –
but good publicity.
Yes, good publicity. So just another oddity that we've seen at the Worlds. And then, of course, there's the gold Fiero that was won by Steve Pepler. And Steve Pepler, okay, I'll tell you the backstory on this. So when I seen that when I got my announcement or whatever in the mail for the race and all the rules and all the regulations, and they're having having a public race for the non-ranked drivers, I looked on this list and I realized that my friend Steve Pepler wasn't on this list. And I thought, well, if I build Steve a car, Steve can probably win the Fiero. So I call up Steve and I said, hey, here's what's going on. They're having this world championship. They're giving away this Fiero. You can run in this race. You're not going to run against a bunch of super good drivers because they have a separate race for them. If I build the car, will you race it? And I said, if we win the car, we will bring it home, we will fire sell it, and we'll split the cash. So he says, okay, I'm in. So I build the car, which I still have. I have the motor elsewhere, but there's the winning car.
The winning car.
I was the car owner.
And what was the value of these Fieros then?
Oh, I think they were about $9,000. And I told Steve that we would come back and fire sell it for $7,000 to get rid of it. And then we'd split the cash.
$3,500 each.
Yeah, $3,500 a piece. So,
little burner.
So needless to say, Steve had went up early and qualified into the race. And then the week of the race, my ex-wife at the time, I had a car for her. So I figured, if I can get two cars in there, 2 out of 8 odds isn't bad. Although I knew that she probably couldn't get the job done, but you never know what's going to happen. So, this was a report from the race, and
Rather attractive lady, I have to say.
yeah, that's my ex-wife. So moving right along. So anyway,
Moving right along.
so
He gets interested. He wants to move along.
moving right along. So Steve winds up winning the race, and it was on a Friday because we left. Me and the ex-wife, we left. So I drove our car back, followed her in his car that he drove up. He stayed over to get the title and paperwork done for the car. So we get back. It's very early Saturday morning, and Sunday comes. I don't hear anything from Steve. And Monday comes. I don't hear anything from Steve. And Tuesday comes. I don't hear anything from Steve. So I'm like, yeah. So anyway, he calls me on Wednesday and he says, well, we have a problem with the car. And I said, what's that? And he says, well, I want to keep it. And I said, okay. I said, just bring me $3,500 cash and it's all yours. So later that day, he brought over $3,500 in cash and $5 and $10 bills and counted them out at the back table where I was working at the time. And he kept his car and I got my loot and everything was good. So. But,
that's a pretty good story.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Background to, I didn't know anything about that at all.
Right. Well, I mean, we didn't do anything wrong. I mean, as JP, we played the system, JP. So. Yeah. But anyway, so he had JP had purchased the raceway from Jerry Coolidge. I'm going to say 6 to 8 months prior to the World Championships, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. I'm not sure. And then he had John Ford and his wife Linda. This is John Ford of Scale Auto Racing News. Yeah, he had John Ford and his wife then moved from Texas to Chicago, and they managed the raceway for at least 3 months prior to the World Championship event, and they were pretty much doing day-to-day operations. And Scott Wright, a wing car racer, local Chicago wing car racer, he was supposedly the manager at the time. Andy Fisher at the time helped run the raceway, especially the week of the Worlds, kind of ran the concession area and stuff like that. So there was a lot of people behind the scenes there that
they got singing. The guy called John Myers.
John Myers was tied up with Speed Vision the previous year at the USRA Nats, and I don't remember if they had much of that coverage at the Worlds in '88. But John Myers was another one that was a player in there. So most of us stayed at the Holiday Inn, and they ran shuttles to and from the hotel. Now, see, I wasn't a ranked driver. I did not get my way paid there. I was a what they called open racer, where you were an invitational racer because you were invited and paid. So, but the majority of us stayed at the Holiday Inn, and they ran shuttles to and from the hotel. And I think it was the Saturday. I got there on Saturday night before everything started, because I think the first race was usually on Sunday. Anyway, so I'm there Saturday, and I remember we're all there. I don't know about all of us, but I was there practicing pretty late. JP was there, and there was other people there, and the shuttles weren't running. And JP needed, I guess, it was him, Peaky, and Rashida, and the shuttles were not running. They needed a ride to the hotel, and I think he called for a taxi or cab or something, and he was waiting outside, and I was getting ready to leave, and he asked me, and he didn't even know who I was. And he said, "Are you going to the Holiday Inn?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can you take me?" I said, "Sure, hop in." Well, of course, he's got Rashida and he's got Peaky, and I think maybe even Raymond was in there.
Our friend.
Yeah, so I had a full car, and took them to the hotel. And I remember we were going down one of the main avenues to the hotel, and there was a muffler shop. And JP says, muffler, muffler, muffler. What is muffler? So I had to explain what a muffler, we call it a muffler. I had to explain what a muffler, and he was just like, he just kept repeating the muffler, he was just totally fascinated by this new word that he learned. So it was just, he said it's like 1 a.m. and he's just over there mumbling muffler, muffler. So yeah, and everybody in the back seat's just kind of rolling their eyes at him. So, but yeah,
including his lady friend.
Including his lady friend, correct. So the first enduro race was the 3 Hours of America. And now we raced all these scale cars at the 88 Worlds on an American orange track that had no S's in it. So it was a very high-speed track for these cars.
It was indeed. Was it not an orange?
Yes, it was an American orange with no S's. Yeah. And it was purchased kind of at the last minute, like maybe a month before the race, and thrown in the raceway, and that's what we're going to run the scale cars on or something. So a lot of destruction in these races on that little track because the track was so...
It was wired cars.
Brass wire chassis.
Yeah. If you look at that chassis there...
Well, I have a little close-up of that chassis.
It looks like, very like it is wire, it is.
Yeah.
I thought it was the CS... the Eurotoy 2, which they used the following year.
Yeah, that comes next year.
Yeah.
But Dieter Jens and Burkhard Warner won the first endurance race, and that was a German team, and the second final, I believe I had you and Chris James was your teammate, and you got up to the lead, and you guys won pretty handily, as I remember and recall from the story as well. But because there was enough entries, they ran 3 heats, or 3 races, and like I said, it was overall combined lap totals. We'll see a little bit of that later here. And then the 3 Hours of Euro slot race, which was the enduro race number 2, was won by Andy and Tim Smith. And some of our viewers may or may not know this, but Andy Smith is the owner of Professor Motor, one of the online mail order companies here in the States.
I was going to say that, actually. I knew the guy. He was a very, very nice person, actually.
Yeah, he was an engineer at Ford, and him and Tim, they were really primarily wing car racers, but they did pretty well at this Worlds in the scale classes, and I think that kind of came along with Andy's knowledge of those chassis, because we were racing them in the box stock 15 wing car class at the time, and also he had good knowledge of the motors. So other than putting a scale body on it, and the track wasn't that difficult, like I said, it's an orange track with no S's, and that.
Well, what about the motor? Were they for that 88 race? Did we have our own motors? Or?
Yes, you had your own motors, Group 12s. They were build your own.
Yeah.
And then that race, you and your partner had your motor go bad on them.
Yeah. Well, I think we had the magnets come out, I think.
Okay.
From what I can remember.
Just the article said you had your motor go bad. So.
Yeah, well.
So then the third 3 hour race, Rudy Lusso and Strigilio won, and that was the first Italian victory of the week. And Tim and Andy got disqualified because their armature, if I remember right, was a little undersized. And that was kind of a controversy that went on for the next couple of days. And I think that they were trying to say, well, they ran that motor in the race they won, they should be disqualified. And JP was like, well, we didn't know it then, and we can't say that was, we don't know what motor they ran. So, but then there was just argument about it. So, and then there was the winning car of, well, that was the TQ car of Maresca in Giacobbe.
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 I think we call him Jacobi. Jacobi, I think.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the S, what the S stands for.
Don't know. We might find that in the tech sheets when I get to those.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So then...
Silvio.
There you go. That's what I was going to say, but I wasn't sure. So the fourth race was a 2-hour race in Capra, and Montiglio won that race. And there's a good picture of Mr. Capra, because now you and I remember these guys. Now some of our other viewers probably like, who's going? They're going to say who's Maresca and who's Capra, because you're going to find out as we go on. These guys were pretty damn good. So, but they didn't carry over into the early '90s ISRA stuff.
No.
So
Maresca settled down. I think I'm not sure if he took over the Hotel the Mediterraneo.
Yes, he did.
And he took that over in Sorrento, and I believe he still owns the hotel.
Yes, he does.
It's a flourishing hotel on a lovely. Sorrento is a gorgeous place to visit in the Gulf of Naples. A delight. Actually visited once and had a pizza and beers, and really was very friendly and very accommodating. And there's a
Giovanni.
The guy had great command of English.
Yes.
As we know now, he was inducted into the ISRA Hall of Fame.
Right.
He was very instrumental, working with me and Charlie Gooding and one or two others,
right,
in getting ISRA on its feet, without calling it ISRA at that stage. But
right,
he was very much a forerunner and very much an ambassador, and obviously has a place in the history. And he was a very good racer as well.
Oh yes,
he was world champion 2 or 3 times. But they were working on, like the Czechs are now. They were always one step ahead.
Yes.
The technology, and that's what made them the best. But certainly Alberto Capra, he wasn't a Maresca, but he was pretty damn good. They were outshining Trujillo in those days.
Right.
Trujillo was a distant third.
Right.
To those two guys.
Yep. So then the final enduro race was the 12 Hours of Chicago, and the Brazilians beat the Italians.
Wow.
Bugano and Bernardino, but AKA Gugu.
Well, it's amazing how Gugu went right away through and still very active and still a top racer. But Bugano just quit.
Right.
After 89, I never saw him again in any international races. He just seemed to go into other areas of his life, like some others, of course. And here's a delightful Corina Giannotti.
Yes, and her husband. Yep,
and
he was the endurance world, or they were actually, I guess, the endurance world champions. I don't know why her picture wasn't on the cover, but they teamed up and in the enduro races, and I think he was the overall champion when it was all said and done, based on points.
Yeah.
Due to consistent finishes.
The Italians were like the Czechs are today. They were the boys.
Yep. Yes, they were.
They were the boys in that era of slot racing. They had links with that lady who became the man who became a lady, who I'm trying to think of his name now. Magnani.
Okay.
And she was owner of a company who produced commutators, and she was very rich, and so she did a lot of work with Dan DeBella to develop pro slot strap motors for the Italians.
Gotcha.
Special wines with very low timing in comparison to the wing racing, which you know, all the lines were all set for wing racing, really.
Right.
And that's why they were at the front in that era, and they got the motor sorted.
Yep.
But of course, this is endurance. This is just pretty standard box stock.
Yeah, C-can. Yeah, C-can mirrors. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, she was one of the best, quickest ladies I ever saw slot racing, certainly.
Yep.
And certainly one of the prettiest as well.
Oh, yes. As we said yesterday in the pre-show, I mean, a true beautiful woman. I mean, no makeup needed, or I mean, just a true beauty. And
well, exactly. Compared with the young women of today, who you don't recognize when they take the makeup off.
Right.
It's not the same person.
Yep.
But it's that's fashion, of course. I mean,
right.
You know, but yeah, you know, when she was in a man's world, she didn't feel the need, and as you said before, was sort of Sophie Loren.
Yeah.
In the early days, Eva Gardner was another one I always thought had a beautiful natural beauty. But these days, you know, they have to work on the eyelashes and all this other stuff they're doing now with Botox and everything. Horrendous.
Yep. So.
That's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, that's okay. And that's not a great picture, but that's Sergio Maresca, and
the son of God.
Yeah, he was the man of the hour at that time. So. Yeah. And then Sergio, he won the old timer championship race, which again was the wire 12 chassis, and the old timers race was the Euro toy chassis, and of course, like I said, you know, here's my body from the old timers race. So, what was interesting about the old timers race was we qualified, in the top 8 qualifiers made 2 semis, 4 in each, and then everybody else ran consies, if you will, to move up into the semis, and then the top 4 out of each semi then made the main, and everything prior to this race had been based on overall laps in the overall finish, and this was run USRA style, and I remember that in my semi I finished 3rd or 4th, and I made the move up to the main, but I ran less laps than 5th and 6th and 7th in the other semi.
The B race.
And yes, and they were complaining that they should be in the race. And, you know, JP stuck with the, you know, these are the rules. Yeah, 4 and 4. So I made the main. And you know, again, those were the rules going into it. 4 from each semi made it. So, and so, you know, here's a little story about it, that the winner of the second semi would have only made 6th place in the first semi, therefore did not reach the final, and justifully upset were Raisin, Garrett, and Capra. Because I can remember Raisin being one of the most vocal about it. But anyway, they didn't make it. They didn't turn enough laps in their semis to finish in the top 4.
But Raisin was, I mean, he featured quite prominently in the results, actually, Raisin.
Yeah.
I think his world ranking was one of the highest, apart from Limpak. I think Limpak was a top guy, and I think Raisin Garrett was about 3rd in the world ratings at that time. I think 88, 89.
Right. Well, so, you know, I've said in the past, there's only a handful of guys that ever did really well in both wing cars and scale cars, because not many guys can do well in both. And Raisin was one of those. Raisin, Gugu, they were, you know, a couple of those guys in that handful that had won championships in both scale and wing and could do.
But what about Limpak in that then?
Well, Limpak, of course. You know, Tori Anderson's another one. You know, like you said, there's just a handful.
The thin on the ground guys who could do, particularly 1/32 Formula One, which was developed in the years.
Right.
That was the toughest for the Americans, I would guess, who are used to wing racing.
And then when you say wing cars and flexi cars and 30-second cars and, you know, Eurosport cars, then that even gets to be a smaller handful. You know what I mean? Like, not many guys do everything well, and Raisin was one of those for sure. And so then, of course, in the main, I finished. I think I pulled out early. I don't remember what was going on. Something wasn't right with my car or something. But I definitely in that race learned that I had a lot to learn yet about just not, you know, setting up cars and tires. Tires were a huge thing. If you didn't have the right tires, you weren't going very far. So, and I had a little bit yet to learn about driving too. So, the Coupe de Benelux race, which was C1 cars, and I think they ran both C1 and C2 cars together in the Coupe de Benelux race. There was 54 entries, and Alberto Capra was our winner. And then Paulo Trujillo won the International Group 12 Championship. And it says it's a pre-wedding present, so he must have been engaged to be married after he got home from the race.
He looks, you know, I'm used to seeing the guy with very little hair.
Well, that almost looks like a lineup shot from a mug shot or something. It's not.
He must have been. If I was 43 and when this is all happening, or 42, he looks in his mid-30s there, doesn't he?
Sure.
He looks a fair bit younger.
Yeah.
But definitely Italian looking, of course.
Yep. So, and then in that race, you again didn't do very well.
No, that year we had a night. I think and yet strangely enough, we just didn't have the car or the motor really, and the track itself was so simple, being in Orange.
Right.
That was all about the performance of the car. But it was a learning curve for us. You know, the first year on 88, we didn't do particularly well. In fact, we got so tired we ended up going up CS Tower and seeing the Chicago life in Chicago.
There you go.
Important at that stage, I think. But hey, it was a marvelous time.
Right. And then Jan Limpak
slaughtered us, the Italians. Wow.
Yeah, he slaughtered him. I mean, you know, he beat the Italians at their own game, 30-second Eurosport, you know.
Yeah.
Because they were.
The guy could drive, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And there's a picture of Jan with his tit hat and his trophy. And then Gary, of course, won the 30-second pre-qualifying race, which I think you had to, in order to make the 30-second World Championship field, you had to run. If you weren't ranked or didn't have enough points, you had to run through the pre-qualification race, and Gary won that.
Yeah, I know it's Chris Ruddish was there, and Pete Sardella.
Yes. And then George talked about this car earlier. This is the CSBP car, as they call it, chassis, and that's what replaced the wire and brass chassis for 1989. And I still have mine. It's brand new. You know what? I never built this car because I left that race early. So it's a laser cut center section and then has brass pans on it. Very simple, light car. Probably too light and probably not really the right design for the MTT track they raced on the next year, but everyone was in the same boat. So
it certainly equalized.
But they showed the car at the race in 88, like this is what we're going to do for next year. So here's the tech sheets from the races, and we'll kind of quickly go through these but there's a lot of names. There's a lot of names of the people that were there, a lot of history there. As you can see over here, we got class C1, C2. So C2, again, was stamped metal chassis. C1 was the brass wire. So, you know, in the first race, you had Dieter and Warner, they won with a wire chassis. But in second place was Dave Liebenthal and Lee Gilbert, and they ran a Eurotoy chassis. And the lap difference was 29 laps, I think, 39.
Yeah.
So, but in endurance races, it's not always the chassis that costs you. I mean, there's other problems. So, or you have room for other problems. In the Group 7 warm-up race, Paul Pfeiffer was the winner, Alpha Tires. Scott Wright was second, and Swiss was third. I don't know if I guess Randy, we didn't run he may not have been there because Randy Marshall, which we raced together in one or two of these 3-hour races. And you know what? I don't know why we raced in those races. Maybe we had to for some reason, or maybe he had to run in the Group 7 without running a pre-qualification race or something. But we didn't run in the second one. And then the 27 warm-up race was won by Nick Searcy. Scott Wright was second, and Dave Liebenthal was third. Pete Sardella down there in 12th. JP van Rossum with a wing car in his hand. He was 12th.
And Sylvian Pigney.
Yes.
French guy. Remember that name going all the way back?
Yep. So,
Peter James.
Yep.
Yeah, he was in.
The late Martin Graham. So the 3 hours of, so there I am. I'm down there in 19th, me and Randy. I know that race that Randy wasn't a good scale racer, and Randy, between him hitting the Germans coming off in the straightaway a couple of times, we totally kind of destroyed that car, and we had to quit early. So he kept fixing it, but it just was. This isn't very good.
Well, it looks like I took a day off from that one because I can't see.
Yeah.
Either Paul Lyon or myself on that. So I think we went out for a bit of tourism, I think.
Right.
By the third one, I think.
So you got Wayne Bramble in there with Limpack, Mark Harrison.
In fact, if you look down there, you'll see quite a few people did not qualify.
Yes.
DNQ.
Yep, did not qualify. You know, Montiglio and Capra didn't qualify. I don't know. Well, they ran a qualifying time. Let's see. They went.
Yeah, I think it might have been something to do with they didn't want to race.
They went 388, but then they didn't race because, I guess, me and Randy out qualified them because we went 387. They went. Oh, maybe they went 88 or 86. I guess we were real close, but so anyway, so then the Group 7 warm-up race. I thought we already had one of those. I guess this was the second one. Lasse Aberg from Sweden was your winner. Swiss was second. John Olsen was third. There's Randy. Randy was fifth in the warm-up race because he came up a little bit later in the week. I got there early. He came up later. He was all about Group 7 cars. He didn't want to race scale cars. But we had to run one or two of these races for some reason. But
well, you had to run them to get your expenses, didn't you?
Well, we were open racers. We weren't invited. So
but you weren't on the wedge at all.
Yeah, so we weren't invitational racers. But we were only 3 hours from there. You know what I mean? So
yeah. I'm just noticing Tebu on the previous page, Tebu Sato.
Yes, he was there. Yeah, and
I didn't think I never knew the guys raced this kind of racing, but obviously he's very prominent in Tokyo.
Yes.
Metro
Yes.
now.
Yes. Yeah.
Tebu.
Well, see, he was the 92 USRA national champion in semi-pro because they came over. There was a contingent from like Haruki and Tabo and I can't think of the other two gentlemen's name, but but every year they would come over to the USRA Nats for the wing cars, and they would race like from '88 for sure through '92, and then they kind of quit coming over.
Right.
And they might have been at the '87 Nats. You know what? I just don't remember. So yeah, so he's been racing as long as we have. So I don't think he ran any of the scale races.
No, I would. That's probably why I haven't recognized the guy,
right,
in terms of his name.
Scott Wright won the Group 27 warm-up race. Enthusiast.
Bella seemed to be very involved, didn't he?
Who that? Scott Wright?
When we look at all of the events, I mean, Dan Bella, I never really heard about him racing very much, but
yeah,
he certainly turned up for this one, didn't he?
Yeah. Dan didn't race a lot in the States after he moved to Michigan from California. Let's see. There seems like there was something. I don't remember. Anyway, so I was going to say the Enthusiast was the other slot racing magazine that was in competition with John Ford, and of course that it was owned by Teresa Anderson, and her and JP were like water and oil. So yeah.
Who was the oil?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Well, Teresa Anderson.
There's another legal case involved with Teresa Anderson somewhere and all that.
Yeah, I think there was, and Teresa took the side of some American pros who didn't really care for what JP was doing at the time, and that got her into trouble with JP. And of course, the magazines, JP liked to stir controversy in those, and that's the way it was. So
all this history involving JP putting people noses out of place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really? I see this one here was Bernardino and Van Buggenhout, and James won an extra $1,000 for having the highest placings pro slot car.
Yes.
And an extra $200 was won by Van Buggenhout for the first lap.
Right.
That was when they had the race where they ran outside, came from outside.
Well, they did that both years because I think, if I remember right, in '88 that they said they were going to do that, and Clithio taped his control wires to his fingers. Okay.
Right. So
all they do was walk in and put them down, and he led that first. Everyone's hooking up their controllers. He's a half to three-quarters a lap ahead of everybody.
Well, the guy was thinking out of the box.
Right. So he went. So I remember he makes the lap. He stops. He untapes and hooks up to the track, and he takes off. So
he's $200 for it.
$200.
Well, that's good thinking, wasn't it?
Cha-ching. So Group 15 race was won by John Torrey Anderson, who was from Sweden, but raced in the States. John, we talked yesterday. I mean, John raced in the 60s in the United States with Sucrus and Stubbe and all those guys. And I don't know what year his family came from Sweden to the United States or if his whole family came or what, but I mean, John Anderson's lived in the United States. I mean, he was 14, 15 years old in the heyday of the 60s slot car racing scene. So
yeah.
And he's been here ever since. So he's been here a long time. So, but his nationality is Sweden. I would think that he's a U.S. citizen by now, but I don't know that for sure. But when it came to him and JP's races, he was from Sweden because JP always liked to have as many different nationalities there as possible. So if you were a U.S. citizen, but you were born and you lived in a different country for a while, then that was your nationality, and that's what you went down as. So. And then the Coupe de Benelux race, which was won by Capra, 54 entries. That might have been the biggest race of the week.
Yeah, I think everyone turned up for that one.
Yeah. And then the
And
old
they're
timers
top of the game
race.
there at the bottom. The thing about it is, when you look through all those results, is that there was quite a mix of, in this particular 88 racing, there was a lot of different drivers who featured in winning.
Right.
There was no dominant force like maybe the year after with Impact.
Right.
This is, it's very Vlado Okali and Chris Razich.
Yep. Yep.
And what about John Tor Anderson? Is he still racing now? Or?
Yeah, he shows up. He has a lot of back issues, and
Right.
so he's not 100%. I don't want to. I say healthy, but physically healthy, he's not 100%. So that limits his racing somewhat.
Makes it difficult for him to stand for a protracted amount of time.
Yeah. And then the Group 27 championship race was won by Andrew Wasserman,
which was probably the most popular win of the whole of the series. Actually, I mean, a guy in a wheelchair. And, what guy got when he was driving? He was an amazing driver. But actually, let's go look. It must be the following year. Tim Ryan doing so well in the wing racing. He finished, I think, I'm not sure if he finished something like 14th in the Group 7 race.
Right.
Tim Ryan, Englishman who never raced wing racing. It was quite remarkable. But anyway, we'll go into that later. That's, we'll get this National 12.
Yep. There's the public Fiero race, which Steve Pepper won. He beat Mark Matei, who was a local racer. And Mark Matei had a slot car track in the Chicago area, an old American Red, in the basement of a bicycle shop. Don't know if he was still had the track in 1988 or not, but prior to that, earlier in the 80s, he did for sure. And Mark Matei is a big collector of vintage slot car stuff to this day. He has.
I've had contact with the guy in the past, actually.
Tons and tons of stuff. And then
it's a long time since I've heard from him, but that rings a bell. The guy was a huge collector.
Yep. And then Yvonne Coolidge.
He got $500, I see.
Yep. Yeah, it was second place. Yvonne Coolidge was third, which was Jerry Coolidge's daughter.
Yeah.
And then Al Haig was a local racer, and Rich Horde was local racers.
Rich Horde.
Yeah.
I heard that name somewhere.
Yep. And then
Laura Hirschman.
Yep, at the end. And then you got I guess Dries, I don't know if it's pronounced Terry or Theory from Belgium was in the race too. So, and you can see the qualifying times of where they qualified. Because I think the ex-wife just barely made. I think she was the 8th fastest qualifier, and that put her in of other people that qualified months earlier and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
well, I mean, but the guy who won, Steve Pepper, he was 5.683. So
yeah, see, he had qualified like a month or two before the race, and he didn't try to go any faster because he didn't need to. So, but if somebody had showed up and went faster, maybe bumped him out, we would have.
He would have had to.
Yeah, his car was really fast. Yeah, so yeah, we would have bumped back in, but didn't come to that. So now it says I had 100 entries. I don't know if that many people actually bought cars and qualified locally or not. I have no idea, but there wasn't 100 people there the day of the race. So, and then there's your drivers Fiero race, and yeah, Peaky was.
Of course, looking back on it now, I mean, this was along with the Ferrari that Willie Herwig won in the Pinky Point series before Van Rossum got started
in '86.
All of this racing. Yeah. They're the only times we ever saw real motor cars given out as prizes, I guess. 3 cars.
Well, there was a race in '85, I believe, and I don't remember. Was there a race in Valkenburg? Maybe for JP's first race or something?
That would be maybe '86.
Okay, well, he gave away a Honda.
Oh, right. I'd
to John Strachan and Chuba. They won some race and they won a Honda. And I know that they brought it over to the States. I never seen it, but.
Well, is that the sports car?
Yeah, it's like a 60s Honda.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have a story about that.
Okay.
Because when I finished this series of races on 88, I was coming out of the hotel and there was Shabba in his Honda.
Okay.
That must be the same car.
Yes.
And so he ran me down to the night for a meal on the evening time on the last night. So I, got the top down and we're riding down from Illinois down into Chicago City and all the bright lights, and I'm in this sports car with the wind ruffling my hair,
Okay.
showing this guy's hospitality. I always remember, I never forgot that. And it was I think it was a white Honda, I think.
All right, well, I'll have to dig the photo out with him and Strachan getting the car because they have like big wreaths around them and they're shaking hands over the roof.
This Shabba guy, is he Eastern European, I guess?
Yes, Chuba was born, I believe, in Czechoslovakia, and his family immigrated into the United States when he was a young boy.
Right.
Chuba raced for Team Cayman. He was he was actually an engineer or an architect. I'm sorry, but I think he had some engineering as well. And he built beautiful cars. He was a former world record holder. He raced weekly with Swiss and those guys in Chicago because he was in Chicago too. I mean, in the early 80s, if you were developing Group 7 stuff, you needed to be in Chicago because that's where the battles were taking place on a weekly basis. So a lot of people didn't like Chuba because Chuba had just had a unique attitude at times and the way he said things and did things. But he was a really super nice guy once you got to know him. And sadly, Chuba has passed away a few years back.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, a few years back he passed away at a fairly young age too. I mean, I don't even know if he made it to 50, but he had a
tough to take that one.
Yeah.
But hey.
So, and then the Group 15B race was won by Rich DiMondo. I was the top qualifier for that race. I didn't realize that until I seen this the other day. I was like, okay. And I think my chassis got broke. But anyway, I had loaned a motor to Raisin because Raisin, he qualified like 3.7, and I think he made the move up, but Kiora says, hey, do you have a motor I can borrow? And I says, sure, I got a motor you could probably win the race with. And he almost won. He was only
He was one lap off winning.
Yeah.
And the rest of the guys were nowhere, were they, by comparison?
Right.
3-3-4, next total down.
Yep. Raisin had a very good car, and we gave him a good motor, and he did good. So, and we'll go here. So then there's the 30-second pre-qualification race with Gary
Callum, yeah.
Yeah, Peter Sardella and Chris Radish and Paul Mayers, which was Paul Mayers was the publisher of Slot Car Bulletin magazine. That was a pretty big magazine from '93 up until 2005 or 6. He's no longer with us either, I hate to say, but I don't remember Paul being at that race. But hey, I may have already left when they ran the 30-second scale cars because, like I said, we left Friday after the Fiero race. So,
right.
I think they ran.
Didn't do the World Championship of Group 7.
No, because I wasn't. I was just. I was running semi-pro. I wasn't. So basically, I was there to help Randy, and you can use my motors and stuff if you need them. So, and then the 7th World Champion. Do what?
I was just saying Mike Swiss was the winner.
Oh, Mike Swiss.
Dave, another name, Dave Borden.
Dave Borntrager. Dave Borntrager. And Lossie Aberg, Stuart Coford, Gary Girding, Wayne Bramble, and then Reggie Corum was 8th, and then we had John, somebody in there in 7th. Can't make out John's last. John Olson, I'm sorry. O was looking like a C. But yeah, you had about 5 Cayman, or excuse me, 5 Coeford guys in there, and a couple of Cayman guys.
So this by now, you are talking about Group 7 particularly. By the looks of Cayman, they look way down. That's the end of their era. Was earlier. Joel Montague was coming to his end. Was he by then? And it was now the Mike Swiss and Stuart Crawford era.
Yeah, Cayman was still. This was the era of getting into quad magnets and stuff, because the previous year, '87, at the '87 Worlds or Nats in the U.S., Phantom and Cayman, because of Bob Green and Lee Gilbert's discovery, quad magnets were the way to go over the single magnets. Coeford denied that quad magnets had an advantage over single piece magnets, and they severely got trounced at the '87 Nats by quad magnets and PK and Cayman arms. So going into the '88 Worlds, of course, now Stewart has quad magnet technology as well as everybody else. But Coeford's advantage was it was the 459 motor that was so low and light. And
which is always the case with lighter and smaller.
And back then, the tracks were more handling tracks than they were tracks that could handle brute horsepower. And the Caymans and the Pro Slots, and they were running, 480 arms, bigger, heavier setups. They don't hook up as well. They make more horsepower down the straightaway through the bank, but they can't run the back half.
They don't pull out the corners quick enough.
So, yeah, at this time, Coeford is now dominating Group 7 racing. So.
And there's Pete Sardella at the bottom.
PKP. PKP.
Yeah.
And then there's your 32nd or 1/32nd scale world championship with James Chris.
My friend Chris James, who raced up North London. He was an excellent driver, but he didn't have any real technical know-how.
Right.
But he's like a guy who would get the maximum out of a car. He was just a driver.
Right.
And I think Van Rossum felt sorry for the guy, because I'm trying to look at his distances. But he was very respectable. He just kept it in, drove well.
Right.
And now and again, a Brit came through, and thank God for that, because I think we were all shattered by then. I think the mental side of racing for 12 days and particularly the endurance races finished us off, I think.
Yes. And then the last race was the World Cup Revenge Race, which is everybody gets their chance at the current winning Group 7 world champion, and get your revenge, as they say. And Swiss got revenge on himself, so.
So Mike Swiss and Stuart Crawford are pretty much.
And those guys had raced on that track for 2 years, going on 2 years straight. I mean, they knew that track
so they
knew that track like the back of their hand. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from their winter hard work, but I mean that was.
They certainly had an edge.
Yes, yes. So.
Gary Putz, he's fourth. He was fourth there.
Yep, and there's John Torrey Anderson.
John Torrey Anderson. Very charming guy.
Yep.
I love the guy. Really, first time he teamed up with the Brits, and we went out several times and had a meal or two, and he was a really genuinely nice person, actually.
Super nice guy.
Yeah.
So we go to 1989, and the orange track is replaced with this MTT track that. Had you ever seen an MTT prior to this? I guess you did. Well.
Yeah, I saw it in Toulouse in '87.
Okay. But you guys didn't race on it, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, you did.
No,
okay.
we didn't race on this track. I'm not sure. I think this is a new track.
This is a new track. Yeah, this is not the France track. Okay. Okay, so you had already seen one and raced on one. Okay, I didn't know if you had went to Toulouse or not. Um, so some changes from '88 to '89. JP has stepped down as the chairman of IMCA, and JP was not present um, at the Worlds. I think this is when they had the F1 team in 1989.
Yeah,
But
that's when he was getting involved in other things.
But we had JP's money, and Andy Smith took over the magazine. Um, Andy Smith ran the event, the '89 Worlds, and there's the cover from the race report issue after the Worlds, which you have Stuart Cofford as the new Group 7 world champion. And so we're going to just move along here pretty quickly. So there was the enduro races this year were 8 hours versus 3.
Yeah, exactly. So we had 4 hours driving each.
Right. So the first race was won by Limpak and Bramble, and Capra and Mariska was second, and Gugu and yep, they were third. So they look pretty fresh and clean after 8 hours of racing, but this was later in the week at a prize giving ceremony. So this year we have, of course, our C1's cars are based on the CSB chassis.
CS, yeah.
And then you have C1 and C1, well, C1 plus, C1 minus, and then you have C2 plus and C2 minus. And my recollection is, of course, C2 was stamped metal chassis, and the C1s were the CS chassis. But I think the plus and the minus was where you were at in the drivers' rankings.
Yes, I think.
But I don't.
And also, but I think the body you had to use was
okay.
By JP. He decided
yes.
what body it is, and he put the fastest teams, what he thought were the fastest teams,
on
the rankings.
Right.
Gave them the ladies and the better bodies.
Right. And see, okay, so the first race was 8 hours race, and like I said, name the winners. But then I was there, and I raced with Steve Pepler, and we ran C2 minus because we ran the Spice Fiero, and you're right about the bodies. And I remember when I got there Saturday, I had my Spice Fieros on my cars, and I had them painted like I was told prior to the race, and then I was told that my bodies were painted incorrectly, and they would let me run the next day, and I would have to then remount a bunch of bodies. And I was like, no, and I went home after that. So I only raced the first day, and then I left. So I was there for like 2 days, maybe 3 days, and then I left. I went home. So the second 8 hours of race was the 8 hours of Moneytron. So Moneytron, yeah, it was still around. This was 1989, and of course, the F1 car was in 89. So Sergio and Capra won that race over Silvio and Giovanni, and then you had Wayne and Jan in third in the C1 Plus. And I mean, if you look down through here, I mean, like C1 minus was Joseph Hajek, who is Cahoza.
Yeah.
And
Jimmy Mitchell.
Yep. And they finished 8th overall out of this probably would have been the third race run, because I think they ran slower cars first and worked their way up to the fast cars. And
I can't remember looking back now. But I mean, we were teamed up with, obviously, against Dave Jeek and Chris Radisich.
You were down here with those guys.
I see we finished 5th on that one.
Yeah.
We had a really good race in that one.
Right. and Gick
and you look at the laps. I mean, nice to be ahead of Trujillo.
Sure. Right.
And the Gianottis as well.
Right. So.
That's from the last 88 race, the 89 race. Everything went well for us.
Okay.
We big contrast. We all had the same chassis, the same motor. What I can't remember is whether we took the motors apart and comped them or what we did. I can't remember now. Seems an awful lot of racing, 8-hour races with one motor.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they were being rebuilt or guys had extras.
Yeah.
So then you had the Group 12 sprint race where everybody had to run the BS chassis. And there's David he's from New Zealand.
Young Dave Jick from New Zealand.
Right. He was not quite in his prime yet, but he was getting ready to come into his prime here, wasn't he?
He was certainly on the way up.
Yeah.
He shocked a lot of people over the next few years. Yeah.
And then Jan Limpak
already suited on and all ready to go and pick up another wad of money. Oh, I don't know who that guy is.
Another guy in his prime.
I look a bit scruffy there, to be honest, but hey.
It was probably after enduro race, right?
Well, there was a reference to it in the raceway. The temperatures outside were 103.
Yes.
It was one of the hottest summers in Chicago of all time, and we were literally sweating our hoo-joos off.
Yeah. And then
that was one of my two great races, really, when I look back. To be 6 laps down on Limpak and only 3 down on Gick.
Right.
And Mark Harrison was up there with me, so another 3 laps back. Yep. That was a pretty good performance.
And then that's where Gugu got disqualified for some kind of funny spoiler on the front of his body. But I remember hearing the story, but I wasn't there, and I don't remember.
I don't think Gugu was Mr. Van Rossum's best friend. But having said that, he wasn't there, was he, when I think about it?
No.
So, because Mark Harrison got thrown out as well in a later race. Well,
okay. So, this was the Group 27 warm-up race, which was won by Albert Sylvan from Sweden.
Jerry Coolish.
JK man. You got Paul Lyon down there and Jeffrey Mitchell.
Got Tim Ryan at 7th. Tim Ryan.
Yeah, Tim Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the 8 hours of Modellist race, and of course the dynamic duo of Maresca and Capro win again, beating out Bramble and Limpak and Gugu and Clithio. And George Kimber's down there 12th overall on that day with Paul Lyon. And see, Radishish and David, they finished 3rd overall with a stamped steel chassis. So that was pretty impressive. But
that was the same chassis. I think the C2 minus was the
C2 minus was stamped steel. You're right.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of the young Gugu.
Yeah, he was a young man, all right. Group 15.
Yep, this was more or less International 15 at the time. Rick Sloan from Michigan was the winner. Brian Lowe from Seattle was 2nd. And Jeff Long, I believe he was from maybe Kansas, was 3rd. Brian Sloan.
And Tim Ryan again down there at 11th.
Yep.
Which, for a guy who doesn't race wing racing, was incredible, really. Reggie Coram as well.
Reggie Coram. So, and then the Group 7 warm-up was won by Mike Swiss. And Jay Horn was 2nd. Albert from Sweden was 3rd again. He had a pretty decent week with Group 7 cars. Gary Girding was 4th. He's a track builder. The late Martin Graham was 5th. John Olson, who hasn't raced in a long time, he was from Chicago. And Gary Pitts is still racing. He's the USRA Wing Car Tech Director nowadays. And
right.
So, and then the Group 7 pre-qualifying race. I don't remember exactly how that worked, but I think these guys had to run this race in order to then be in the Group 7 field.
Yeah, probably they had no ranking.
Right.
You know, they had no IMCA points, so that classification. So that's why they would be like you, just turning up in the US and because apart from that number, the guy ninth, Roman Siddle or whatever, Czechoslovakian. And Marcel van Es was actually he was a Dutch kid who helped in the all of the organizing of the meeting.
Okay, so the 8 Hours of Model Race International Enduro again was won by the dynamic duo of Capra and Mariska. Yeah. And I got a question for you because I was going to ask you this yesterday. Do you still have your apron?
Well, I did have for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether the wife's thrown it out, to be honest. like most of my, you notice there's no references to slot car racing on my walls in here.
Right. I still have mine, and I still have Randy's. I have
got the sticker, the gold sticker.
Yeah.
With the.
Yep, I got that.
Yeah, I've got my car box to this day.
I guess I don't have it in this room. I thought I had one of the 2 aprons in here, but no. So I'll have to dig it out for another show. But anyway, yeah, all the entrants had aprons. It had your ranking number.
That's right.
I think.
And actually, in this racing event, in the '89 race, there's reference to me forgetting to put my bib on, my number on.
That gets you in trouble.
And I got penalized 10 laps.
Yeah.
It's also worth telling people who are listening that you could not say a word when you were driving.
Yes, that's right.
You could not in any way interfere with marshalling verbally.
Right.
And there was some pretty fancy tricks went on occasions as well. There was favoritism towards their friends and things like that. But Van Rossum would penalize, well, although he wasn't at this race, actually the '89 race. Right. On previous occasions, Mark Harrison was thrown out of a meeting.
He raced with tape on his mouth one time, didn't he, to keep his mouth shut?
Right. I think that was in Toulouse after he'd been penalized twice. And another guy called Monty Yarnell, another Englishman in Toulouse, I remember, Van Rossum penalized him for the 3rd time, and he told him where to go. He walked away, took his controller, and turned to him and said, "You can check that, mate."
Oh.
It taught me in my future life, in slot racing terms, to control myself better. Right. Because you had to, it was so frustrating when a marshal would have 2 cars in his hand and you hadn't, all you did was stop your car to avoid the accident. Right. And he didn't respond, you'd lose 1 or 2 laps. It always, for every racer, it's always been frustrating when those kind of incidents happen. Right. But I guess you've got to live with them. Right. But I noticed there that my tourism has taken over again because that one definitely is. I'm not in that race. So this is Steve Cope. Yeah. Steve Kemp. Yep. He. Kemp. K. Just think of KEP. Kemp. Yeah. So Steve worked at Parma. In the R&D department, him and Greg Fox, they were teammates and partners in these endurance races, and as the week went on, they slowly got better, got their flexi car running better, and Greg was more of a wing car racer at the time than he was a scale racer, so he got better as the week went on, and they wound up finishing 10th in the last endurance race overall. And there's a picture of their car, and that was kind of an accomplishment for a flexi car to do so well, because it had its limitations when it came. Well, certainly a bit of lead, big chunks of lead everywhere. Yeah, and on the bottom of the chassis to get the front end lower and all that stuff. So, and then the Group 27
World Championship was won by Martin Graham. And Martin was a real full-size race car driver back in the 60s. I think he was a team racer for one of the makes, and he was involved in an accident and was paralyzed after the accident from his waist down. And Martin raced in his wheelchair, and he was the 1995 USRA National Group 7 champion, the first foreigner to win a USRA National Championship in Group 7.
He was a hell of a good driver.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And Martin was a hell.
Also, being teamed up with Crawford would help as well.
Right.
That time.
Right.
You'd have the right kit, wouldn't he?
Yep. And he was just a hell of a nice guy. And
you look guy, yeah.
Yep. He has since passed on. So, yep. Martin Graham.
That looks a guy called Jay Young somewhere in there.
Yeah, Jay Young is this gentleman right here.
Yeah, that's right.
And I 1990 or 91, I think it was 90, I won the 1990 World, it was a semi-pro, but they called it Restricted Group 7 World Championship, and I held off Jay and won that race over Jay. So the 8 hours a Euro slot was won by Mr. Limpak. And
that was a reasonable performance, 9th overall there.
Yeah. The Italians must have set this one out because there's not an Italian in the field. Oh, yeah, there is. We got Rudy Lusso down there, yeah.
Well, I suppose after about 8 or 9 days of slot racing, I suppose
right.
The enthusiasm wanes a little bit, I would think.
And then the 24 hours race got shortened down to 16 hours just because it was such a punishing schedule and week. And there's the winning body of Bramble and Limpak, which was done by Joe Hutton in Cincinnati, who owned Grand Prix Raceway. And here they are running to the start of the 16-hour race. Looks like Wayne Bramble's in the lead, and I guess Cliffio's. Yes, he's. Celcio. Yeah, that's right. And then
Maresca behind him.
And I don't know if we've got. I'm sure someone's probably got their wires taped to their fingers after seeing what happened the previous year. There's your winning team. Sergio and Alberto was second. Third overall was Paulo Trujillo and Paulo. Yep.
Oh no, sorry. Third was Trujillo Nicolai.
Yeah. So not as many.
Were eighth.
Yeah, just 20 teams entered that race.
Well, I mean, I'm not there, and Paul Lyon's not there. In fact, I think
right.
Is there English there?
I don't see any English.
We've all
crumpets,
taken the ship for
crumpets and tea. So here's George sneaking in a Parma R&D meeting with Greg Fox and Steve Kemp, Ken McDowell. And you said you were looking at a 101 chassis and talking about it?
No, it was an SCD chassis.
Oh, SCD chassis. That's
it
right.
was actually a chassis that, before I started working and getting involved with SCD, we produced probably about 10 different chassis over a period of 8 or 9 years. This was a chassis that Chas developed.
Okay.
Designed it, but had a soldered on rear end. So the can was actually soldered to the center plate.
Right.
Behind the flexi hinge. It was a very nice chassis, actually, and it worked really well. But I think Ken McDowell was intrigued at the work of the chassis and the fact you had to solder the motor
right.
as a part of the chassis, which was very unusual.
Right.
Certainly in America. And that's Dan looking tired.
Dan DeBella of Pro Slot fame.
Yeah, the man.
And now we're going to talk about the Concours Championships in '89. So course, this was
the winning.
car of Gary again.
Yeah. All, as I said before, hand
Yep.
and lettering.
I mean, you can see the detail of the hand, or the with the glove on it, in that right there in that area.
Yeah.
Beautiful cars, mirrors. So not a great picture, but Gary painted the top two cars in this deal, and that was worth $3,100 to him.
No, but it'll pay off that, isn't it?
Yeah. And then Limpak was third with his diorama of. I remember. Again, Joe Hutton was a raceway owner at Grand Prix Raceway in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Joe did super paint work and detail work, and this one went all out. I mean, they had model car parts in this thing with brake rotors and the extra nose and tires and trash.
I'm not sure that all of the detail actually handicapped the.
Yeah, I don't think that was really.
Beyond,
I don't think
beyond the pale. I think.
Yeah, I don't think that was in the spirit of slot car concours. Let's say. I mean, that's not.
But that would be typical of Mr. Limpak, wouldn't it?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, he's taking it to the next level, and like you said, that was probably a handicap. I mean, if that was mounted on a slot car chassis, and it had opening doors and all the other cool stuff, it could have won maybe, but with the model car parts and it's like that's not what this is about. This isn't a model car concours, a slot car concours. So, but nonetheless, he finished third, and what did he make? $350, and I was told that Joe Hutton was very upset for all the time and effort he put into it to just get the.
Yes, but they've gone completely over the top of it. Yes.
So then we had the Coups de Benelux race, and
well, this was probably my best race, really.
Maresca was your winner again. Paulo Trujillo was second. Clithio was third. Paulo was fourth, and George was fifth.
Yeah.
One lap out of fourth.
Yeah, we had a real battle, Nikolai and I. We'll be meeting up again in England very soon.
Yes.
Coming over for the Corby race, the Ezra race.
Is he going to race?
I've seen the for many years.
Is he going to race?
Yes, he is.
Cool.
And he was 3 or 4 years older than I am. So I'm 70 now. So he must be 74. I'm 75. Remarkable, really. But the guy is a real gentleman. Not
yes, he
very
is.
Fluent in English, but he really is a very nice guy.
Yes.
And when we look at that, the totals, that was my best ever year, really. But combining maybe 3 good events, really good results against the top guys.
Right.
And they were the top guys. I mean, Maresca, and even if you like, Trujillo isn't really featuring. Well, he's second there, but over the whole of the course of these results in '89, he wasn't the guy you would have expected him to be. So he was definitely in the shadow of Maresca.
Well, and you know what? We talked earlier about, Jick coming up. Paulo was another one that came up.
Yeah, they were on their way. Yeah.
Yep.
They were on the way up. We were on our way down.
Yep.
Well, really, all of this coincided for me because within 2 years, my son Michael was developing as a slot racer.
Right.
And so my results went absolutely backwards for 4 or 5 years while he raced.
Sure.
You just can't do the two. You can't be competitive yourself. You've got to focus completely on your own. And when you have a son, you want him to succeed, so all your energy goes towards that. And that's definitely happened. And then when he retired again, 95, I came back into reasonable form then.
Right. So then we had the Group 7 championship, which was won by Stuart Cofford and Ted Pace. It was a P.A. Watson protege was second. Dave Borntrager was third. Martin Graham was fourth. Andrew Wasserman fifth. Swiss in sixth and P.A. Watson in seventh with Clithio in eighth.
Yeah. So if you look at Clithio van Buggenhout, really, he got results in all types of racing. He was one of the rare guys there,
right?
Wing race, who was very comfortable racing scale cars as well, wasn't he? You know, because
yes.
his results.
Yes.
Excellent.
But you know, it's
Tim Ryan, 15th.
Right.
In the 70s, Tim Ryan. I mean, you know, the guy didn't race wing racing. I don't know how he did it.
Right. And see, here's like, if this is wing racing, and it's dominated with USA, and then you go, you know, if we go back here to scale racing, it's dominated by everybody but the US.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're just like I said, there wasn't much what you called scale racing going on. I mean, yeah, sure, we had all of our flexies and all that stuff, but this was high-end scale racing. You know what I mean? So, and then the 32nd Eurosport pre-qualifier.
My friend Alfred Gatt
had Ernie Mazzetti on the pole. He was the top qualifier. And before we get to that, so this mystery prototype 132nd car. This was the Parma Flexi Hinge, which was a 132nd chassis. I would say designed by definitely Steve Kemp and probably Greg Fox had input on it at the time. Not a smashing success. This car was not what I think they thought it was going to be. And then it led.
Sorry, popular in England. In England, we call it the International 32.
Well, no, this led to the International 32. The International 32, yeah, this was made out of steel. 32, the International was made out of brass, didn't have these front wings, and International 32 was a much better car, but still not as good as some of the other stuff. So, like you said, Alfred Gatt was your winner. Jean.
Peter Sardella.
Yep.
Some names there. Charles Pache from Malta as well.
Yep.
Joan Post. Jean Lacarrière.
Yep.
From France. He's still about.
Drew Tarling from Canada.
And of course, Ernie Massetti.
Yep.
The great Ernie Massetti is in there.
Yes, he is. And then the Group 7 revenge race, P.A. Watson got his revenge on
Mike Swiss.
Well, Stuart Cofford was the champion. So everybody that finished ahead of Stuart got their revenge on the world champion. But
there was quite a lot of people got their revenge then.
Yeah. But that race that race paid no money. You just got a trophy. So it was kind of like kissing your stepsister.
Yeah.
You know?
Not too much pleasure then.
And then in 132nd Eurosports, Capra rises to the top. And
yeah, well, it's 5 Italians and 1 Brit.
You got it. And 1 American. You had Limpek in there. So Limpek didn't do as well as he did the following or the previous year. Yeah, it was if Limpek slaughtered the Italians the year before, this was the year of the Italian slaughter with
this was the revenge.
6 of 8 Italians in the main, and they sweep the top 5 spots.
Well, really, they put it down to the tires. They were racing Rabiti rubber,
right,
which no one could get their hands on. This was an Italian brand of rubber, which was exclusive to the Italians.
Right.
We couldn't get. Mark Harrison maybe have been running it. I've got a feeling he might, because he would blag it off anybody.
Right.
I think perhaps he got a hold of some of the rubber, but you can tell the difference.
Sure.
336 from Mark Harrison, 319 from Limpek. But of course, you've still got Giannotti, Nicolai, Rudy Losso. I mean, they were a very strong outfit. You know, the Italians were. very dominant at the time. The French, there's some French performances there, quite decent actually. But I remember this one. I think I was up all night. I didn't go to bed. We had a meal, evening meal with Dave Jick and Chris Ralzic, and then I went home, had a shower, and then went to the race. And I don't think I went to bed that day. And it told me I was absolutely shattered. But after 10 days of racing,
right,
we were probably completely gone anyway.
And there's the rest of the
Without
field.
I think something must have happened to the car to be 112 laps, I would have thought.
Well, and see, another point I'll make here is all the Italians were in the top 10, and 8 of the top 10 were Italians.
Yeah.
So it shows the advantage of what they had in their tires, for sure. And of course, JP was also a publisher of his magazine. That was more or less a special edition for the Antwerp International Speed Week. And then he started the Euroslop magazines for the Pinky Point races. And these magazines are really cool because they had lots of actual factual information about the Can-Am cars of the 60s and some beautiful pictures.
Yes.
And then as it went on, it got more from real car Can-Ams into slot cars. And then race report from Toulouse. And then, of course, JP's going full-time racing with Eurotoys sponsoring Ferraris and things. And, of course, this was the issue before the 88 Worlds, which had all the rules and all that in it.
It had all the rules.
Yeah, special issue, and that's where we're going to end. So.
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting to go through history and recall some great moments. But obviously, slot racing is always like that. You get your good times and you get your bad times.
Yes, and
you've got to keep things back.
Yeah, and even if you went to a JP race and you had a bad time, you still had a good time because of all the camaraderie and the people. And
well, as we know now, that was to be the forerunner of ISRA.
Sure.
And the friendships that develop and the trust we develop between ourselves. And but one thing we wanted to make sure was that the rules were laid out by the racers, for the racers,
right,
by the racers.
Right.
So that I had no guy coming in and changing the rules at the last minute. One thing it taught us about the Van Rossum races was that we had to have control in an equal fairness across the board, really.
Well, and I think that Limpak always summed it up as, I didn't know what the rules were before I went to the race. I didn't know what the rules were when I was at the race. And when I got home, I sure as hell didn't know what the rules for the race was. So,
yeah, exactly.
Because things could change at the flip of a finger. So another thing that I didn't really, I thought about it, and we didn't talk about it yesterday or today, but Capra, most of the Italians and most of the Brits, you guys raced with the plungers or the thumb controller.
Yeah, well, at that time I was, yeah.
Right, and Mariska raced with a Parma. He was a two-fingered driver, if I recall.
I think nearly all the Italians made the move much quicker than the English.
Right.
I think the Italians were all, certainly 88, 89, they were all using Parma controllers.
Right. So yeah, that was the first time I'd seen anyone racing with the plunger.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Italians did. Originally, the Italians all raced with like a circular little...
Yeah.
They did that. So they were doing that in the early 80s, maybe.
Okay.
But Maresca was the forerunner of the trigger.
Yes. He was a trigger man.
Yeah.
And a hell of a trigger man.
Well, one superstar, really. Yeah. Pity we couldn't have all got these guys all together at the same time.
If we could get everybody together in our primes, we'd have a hell of a race.
Yeah, exactly. In our dreams.
In our dreams. Yeah, there's always somebody passing the torches, I say, passing the guard.
Yeah, well, it's a guy who can come up with the technology in we've had hockey now for 20 years or more.
Yep.
And this guy's still winning. Remarkable, really.
Yep.
And of course, Redcheck was a guy who I suppose has come back and proved that he can still do it. And but why he was absent for so long, I don't know.
Right.
But it was because hockey's mate was Joseph Koresh.
Right.
And he almost when he married and moved out to start racing, Redcheck came back in. So
right.
So hockey's always had a really top man to maybe that's how it works. Maybe you need that extra competitive dimension to succeed. But I don't know how old hockey is now. He must be.
Well, he's in his 40s, I think.
He's about 46, 47. I've got a feeling.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to find out this year, testing the waters again and finding out. I finished 11th in the internet, so taking out the 5 top foreigners who were there.
Right.
I was the 5th best Brit, so I was pleased with that. But I only had one car, and I had to practice with it, and I had to redo the motor ready for the race. So this time I've got 3 motors, 3 chassis. So I should do pretty well, really. But whether pretty well is above 20th, I don't know. But we'll find out.
Okay.
I'm carefully enjoying it. I've got nothing to lose. My past history I'll have to live with that. If I can, at 70-year-old, compete, that's all I'm quite happy to do. That'll be great.
Well, we got to go, but I want to thank you once again.
I want to thank you as well for inviting me.
Well, I knew you'd be the perfect man for this job, to go through that history and reminisce and.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been there, done it.
Yep, we were there. You were there more than I was there, but yeah. So
it's been a lifelong journey for me, slot racing, and I'm still getting a lot out of it. So I'm very fortunate.
There you go. All right, George. Well, thanks and good luck on your upcoming warm-up race in Corby. And well, I guess the warm-up race isn't in Corby. Well, it is in Corby, isn't it?
Yeah, they're all in Corby.
Okay. So good luck.
There could be 3 warm-up races.
Okay.
In fact.
And we'll be keeping an eye on you. Hopefully we'll be.
Yeah, well, I'm sure through the pages of Facebook we'll keep in touch.
And hopefully you'll make a podium there on the Corby, and we can get you on between the lanes.
Well, you never know. See how it develops, okay?
All right.
Okay, Ron.
All right.
Yes.
Cheers.